time. First thing I want to show you is what I did to my rotors at the track. It was a bit crazy. And it inspired something really fun. I'll show you. All right, so if you look right here, that is just a big old gash and streak in the rotors. They are absolutely toast because I ran through my pads on the track. It was actually really lucky. I was at Sonoma Raceway and I pulled off the track because I was done for the day. And I was like, oh, that's good. And then I was just doing a little bit of like cool down in the parking lot and I noticed this scraping. And then when I went and looked at what was happening, my brake pads were gone. And the only reason I didn't catch it before was because I had checked the one side where there's one of pads on the one side. So the outside passenger side pad was not worn down. So I didn't see it mid-session or mid-day or anything like that. I just missed it. Luckily, I didn't get caught in the middle of a session without brake pads, but and it happened right at the end, so that was cool. But I didn't have any brakes to drive home on, and that's a 500-mile trip, which is, don't even tell me how stupid that is, I know. So I called a local, I will not mention who, dealership to get just front brake pads from, and they tried to gouge me so hard. They were like, it's $1,000 for the brake pads. I was like, no, not the rotors, just the pads. And they're like, yep, it's $1,000. I was like, no, not for installation, just the pads. And they're like, it's $1,000. And I was like, fuck you, literally. I just laughed really hard and was like, you're ridiculous. And I hung up. That is insane. Watch out for dealerships trying to gouge you. Pads for this car do not cost that much. Not even close, probably a third of that. So this inspired me to do something I've been wanting to do for a very long time that is very necessary if you're going to be tracking your car a lot and driving it home, especially if you have to go to a track that is not close to home. And I bought a tow vehicle. So it is a 2013 Cayenne GTS. I'll share a lot of the information on it, probably on another video at some point. I don't know. A lot of Alcantara, good options. This is the Sport Design steering wheel, which at first I was actually not really stoked on because it doesn't have the control buttons and stuff on the steering wheel, but it is pretty cool. And the paddle shifters actually do come in handy because one of the things I don't like about this car is that when it is in sport mode, the shift points and everything just aren't that sporty. So I don't like the transmission that much, but I do like it a lot with paddle shifters. It is fun. The car has lots of room for the doggos and also this full panoramic sun moonroof thing situation. So pretty cool, but that's not why we're here. Although you should probably hear the engine. Let's see if you can hear this. Not sure if you hear that, but it is a naturally aspirated V8. So that's why I chose this year and model and everything. All the tow capacity that I needed, plus a little, extra fun and none of the gas mileage. We're here to talk about the Alpha. So what I did was I got new springs and modified the suspension a little bit further. Now, the thing that you should know is that I was testing or am testing or had been, I did this in August and now I'm making the video, a prototype spring from Alfissimo. So Jason from Alfissimo, I've talked about this in another video where I did the suspension ECU mod, and Jason made a spring to go with that modification to stiffen the car and just make it as perfect as can be for performance and still having good drivability. So because he was modeling this spring to go with the suspension ECU tune for the GTAm model, he took the GTAm spring and did a little bit of
R&D to make a spring, or he wanted to, like that one. But he wanted to change the ride height. And I think, well, he actually showed me the spring from the GTAm. It was a little bit more dinky than he expected, and he wanted to do a better job than that spring, make it a little bit stiffer. So he thought about, like, should I do, you know, a track dedicated spring and then this spring, or should I make this spring even stiffer? Like, we wanted to answer these questions by putting it on my car and seeing how it rode on the track and on the street and everything. He had already tried out my car with the ECU suspension modification and ST springs, and was like, these feel good. And I agreed, they feel good, but there were some shortcomings. If you do have ST springs and you want to dramatically improve, or any other lowering spring, dramatically improve the ride quality and stiffness, but also comfort, because it'll actually get rid of a lot of bounciness and noise that comes with, not road noise and suspension frequency, then I would definitely recommend getting this suspension mod, even if you have different springs. Now, this spring was supposed to, this new one, be developed to be more ideal. He wanted to make the ride height just right, so it was a little bit higher in the front, just by, like, you know, maybe 10 millimeters at most than the ST spring, so that you didn't scrape as much, since you don't really need that much low. You don't need your ride height to be that low for performance. He also wanted something that was stiffer, hopefully, than the GTAm springs. So he did that. He had it engineered in Italy, and we put it on my car. Now, the other thing that I did was I bought a GMS kit from him, and we installed that as well. So this replaces a large urethane ball joint in the front suspension on the thruster arm that controls for caster. And by removing this ball joint and replacing it with an aluminum billet joint, it stiffens up some of the suspension. I can definitely say there's more feedback before going into the review part, so that's a thing. But the biggest part was that this corrects for caster when you add more camber. So it also came with a camber kit, so we included those, or we put those on, and I'm running 2.5 degrees negative camber in the front. Massive difference in steering response and feel. So that was super awesome. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but this is really about the springs. What was accomplished, as I will show you now in this clip of the ride height. So you still have a nice rake to it. You have the appropriate wheel gap. Everything looks fantastic. It's not quite as aggressive as the ST springs or a lot of the other lowering springs, but because I have about 3 or 4 extra millimeters in the front, which is, I think, about what it ended up being, I'm not scraping on anything, and that is really nice. So as far as performance and feel goes, at the track and on the street, other things. I also have some footage from the track that I will share with you guys. Unfortunately, it's tainted by GoPro motion sense or whatever setting I had on. I'll talk about that later. But in order to do the right testing, we put the springs on, did the suspension modification, and then I drove it 1,000 miles plus a track day, all in one weekend. So I got all of the feel that I wanted to get. And I'll tell you that it is an overall improvement in every single mode over the ST springs. Plus, it's 15 or 20% max stiffer than the ST springs, which means it's better at the track. In this car, it's heavy, and we really, really wanted to take out as much body roll as possible. And when you're really on the edge of your tires, this car starts to actually feel heavy. A lot of people don't know that because they don't drive it at the track. They just drive it on the street. But it is actually a beefy boy. And I think the thing that most people are probably interested in, how does it ride on the street? So I can say in soft mode, it's perfect for the highway. There is no weird bumpy noise. There is slightly more NVH with the car because of the stiffer springs, the stiffer joint. Not because of the camber, but because of the uniball joint that is replacing the GMS kit. But I actually like that because I like road feedback. I don't know who would be watching this channel that actually just drives that car for luxury comfort and performance. It's mostly like a driver's car. So you would actually enjoy the extra tiny little bit of feedback and NVH. I think it's actually nice. The cabin is still very quiet, still way quieter than every other car at the track, and comfortable. The soft suspension is really smooth on the highway. The medium or dynamic damper mode is perfect. It is like perfectly matched with the damper tune. The springs are perfectly matched with the damper tune, so they're perfectly matched with the shocks. And that is really nice for when you're just doing some spirited driving around the road. Now, personally, I drive it in hard or race mode pretty much at all times unless it's raining, so I don't care. But it is very impressive how the mid damper feels. Now, then you go to race mode. It is as stiff as you'll ever feel this car be with any suspension mod out there. So I'm editing the video, and I just wanted to make a quick, just kind of correction to what I was talking about, or addition to. I was talking about race mode dampers and how they're super stiff. I want to make sure that anyone looking for a track focused coilover set or something does not get the idea that this is race car. They are still relatively soft compared to race cars. I've driven a fully built GT4 and other race cars, and they are incredibly stiff. There's no suspension travel. So there's still a lot of suspension travel, relatively. There's still bounce. The car's joints in the suspension are still relatively soft for road driving. So this is not race car. I just want that to be said. So if you're looking for like hardcore track spring or coilover set, there's still room for improvement on this area, but we'll continue on. So it is kind of harsh in a really good way, but it is streamlined for the car. It feels perfect for what you want at the track or for really actually driving. And the biggest difference is in the rebound. So like when you're going over or through a big divot or bump in the road, I have a bump test that I do on a big road near my house where it really unsettles the car. And this car gets pretty unsettled because of its weight when it's going through like a big divot or something. You can feel the back end wiggle and all of that. All of that, it's gone, and it settles in milliseconds. So that was great. Now, obviously that pertains more to the track, but on the street, these springs are still comfortable despite being the stiffest spring you could possibly put on this car that is being made. Now, Jason is thinking about doing an even stiffer track-only spring, but he'd have to, obviously test how that works with the shocks. What are the limits of them? I don't know if he'll actually do that because, to be honest, like this is the money spot with the spring. Now at the track, I'm going to show you some clips and stuff of me at the track. So this is me at Sonoma Raceway going around turn 1. And I'm following a GT3 RS. You'll notice that the camera moves back and forth. This is not the bracket or the camera moving. It's actually the e-stability on the GoPro that I didn't turn off, and it causes it to constantly try to stabilize by moving the lens around. I have no idea why it does that. It's pretty ridiculous. But following this GT3 RS, I am actually pretty close to the limit of these Pilot Sport 4Ss. I was sliding around a little bit that day, and this guy is not by any means experienced in this car or driving that fast. But I did actually gain 10 seconds on my previous best this day. Not about 8 seconds, 8 or 9 seconds. I had a hard time measuring last time I actually measured this. This lap, or one of these laps, was like a 2:04. That was the best I could do on these tires that day, which is decent for this track. And obviously, like, I am a novice, so someone else could drive faster in my car for sure. But I thought this clip was really funny because I've been chasing this GT3 RS for a while, and I think it's right coming up here through this S turn. He has a little oh shit moment, and oh, there he goes, and I think he scared himself, and I did not see him on the track for the rest of the day. think that was it for him. Doesn't look like much on the camera, but he was actually going pretty fast. We were going probably about 60 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour through those. So to lose your back end just a little bit's a little bit freaky. And then he lets me pass here. There weren't also very many open laps on this day. There were a lot of people, so there was a lot of unnecessary braking and letting off and stuff like that. But I think, you know, if I had been in the same conditions, same car, same experience, because of how much more settled the springs were and the body roll, especially in that S turn where the GT3 RS had a little brown flag moment, that was particularly unsettling for this car. There's a lot of elevation changes on this track, a lot of it's kind of a technical track, and the weight shifting back and forth in this car was really uncomfortable the first time around when I was here, and this time I did not experience that at all. I was especially, let's actually be very transparent, there was a huge improvement because of the camber kit as well. Obviously the turn in on this car is dramatically different once you get a 2.5 degrees of camber in the front, and it changes the steering, it changes the response. The uniball joint being replaced with aluminum was super helpful for feedback. I mean, the car just felt completely different and way better. I know that sounds weird if you've never driven this car on the track, but this car is not perfect despite what some people seem to think about it. It is a sedan, it is heavy, it does move around a lot, and it is a little bit numb in the steering feedback. So this was a dramatic difference. Overall, like with everything, there were positives that came from the springs, positives that came from the camber kit. I am super happy. I would recommend doing all of these things because they're the best things you can do for this car. There's literally very few options out there. So there's literally like no stiffer spring setup, which is a huge positive, and you know, whatever you decide to do to put camber into this car for the track, you're gonna do your best if you can, one, correct for caster. I thought I wanted higher caster, so I was a little upset that this uniball joint was correcting for caster and bringing it back down with added camber, but turns out the steering actually got heavier after doing the camber kit with the corrected caster, which brought it back into stock range because my caster was higher because of lowering the car. But yeah, like honestly, the joint, the stiffness, the new feedback, the camber, the turn-in, everything was really, actually the first time I went to a track, I've been here before, I've been to Laguna Seca, the first time I actually really loved this car and driving it, and I think it has the potential to actually be fast. We're gonna need to upgrade the brakes, and I have my eyes on a new set of tires. If you want to talk tires, it's probably for another video because it's a complicated subject and there's not very many options for this car. So in conclusion, car ran real good, went straight down, fast straights, turns, everything you want. Okay, really, the camber kit, very necessary for the track. This is the one to buy, I guess. I haven't tried any other ones. Any kind of a camber adjustment that you can get beyond like the whatever you can get with stock, like I was getting like 1.2 degrees. So if you can get 2.5 degrees or more of camber in this car, it is a game changer on the track. If you want stiff suspension, sporty suspension for the canyons or the track, this is the best option that you have by far. We don't have coilover options. We have KW that has mixed reviews and it's not very stiff. This is the stiffest option you have and the most refined because the dampers match the springs so well. So no, it's not a full adjustable coilover kit, but it is basically an entire new coilover because you have different springs and damper settings. So it's completely transforms the car. I even really like the damper tune with the ST springs. This is just an improvement over that. So if you don't have lowering springs already, or if you do want to improve your lowering springs, these are the ones to buy. One last thing is that I am running a Squadra tune on my car, the Massimo tune. I think that's what it is, the higher one. I went from JB4 to Euro Compulsion to Squadra, and I need to make a whole video of that. I definitely owe that. But I actually ran the Euro Compulsion tune and the Squadra tune at the same track at Sonoma Raceway. So I have personal anecdotes and data. Technically I do have data, but it's not useful. Personal anecdotes on how that drives at the track. Eurocompulsion has more boost. Squadra is better in every single other way, and I highly recommend it, especially for the health of the engine and if you enjoy driving at the track. It is faster at the track because it has better throttle input mapping, so your pedal isn't aggressively sensitive, so you can actually make minor adjustments to it. Why even say this stuff? I'm gonna make a whole video about it. I basically told you everything you need to know right there. It is way better for driving, and even if you're actually just like fucking around on the street like an asshole, sometimes I do that, it is actually also better because you can modulate the throttle and drift better. Not that I would ever do that, ever. All right, guys, bye.